So doing research is very thankless and it's very difficult to get excited about it. But how I get over this is I think about how. So I want to tell you the story. And um, I think it's like one of the most important things that I've had to do to change my mind on things. So growing up, I grew up in a family where there's a bunch of kids running around. My parents were always very stable. They didn't go away to college. They finished high school. My my grandparents. I never knew my dad's grandparents really. Like my grandma I think was, or babcia. They're Polish. Um, she passed away when I was like a couple of years old, so I never really knew them. And I never knew my grandpa because he passed away when I was like 8 on that side. So I knew that we were deeply Polish. We grew up in an immigrant family. Then like Polish life was such an important part of what we did. We ate all sorts of Polish things, and thankfully my mom, she wasn't Polish, but my dad was. And so we had, pierogies, we had a lot of sauerkraut, a lot of, sausages and all that sort of stuff that is very stereotypical, and lots of polkas. I remember dancing a lot as a kid. The extended family wasn't necessarily all that close. They kind of went all their own ways, but I think it was like because, and this is where I'm going to, it was such a hard upbringing, and growing up in a Polish family, I don't think anybody really wanted to stay around that long. They're kind of, from what I understand of my grandparents, they just were, it was just very difficult. It was a different world that they lived in. And so having kids wasn't what you thought it was today. It was often they were there just to work, and that was it. And, one of the things that I think about is remembering this story, and I don't know if it's true or not. So they immigrated in 1935 from Poland. My dad was born in 38. And they went to this little tiny town. There's like nobody there. They're settlers. Maybe a couple hundred people. And, they were in charge of basically were given free land to clear land. And the story is that they lived in a shack. And I remember this story where, I don't know how true it is, but my dad would, in the winter, there was 1-inch cracks through the walls between the winter, like the outside. And I don't know about you, but I don't know if you know what it's like in Northern Ontario. It's -30, -40 for a month, maybe even 2 months. And I think about that and reflect on like how harsh of an upbringing that was. And we're not talking about like these big, giant, houses that we have today, these like 2,000 square foot houses. I'm talking about like a shack that was maybe, 200 square feet, like tiny. And they had their entire family. I think, I can't remember the exact number. I think it's 8 or 9 kids. And then my grandparents all living in this thing. I want you to imagine that, like how hard and rough of a life that actually was. And then on my dad's side, or my mom's side, I reflect on, her mom was a orphan, and she didn't have parents. And then, she married this guy who, to make money and probably actually get a little bit of glory, they lived in Northern Ontario, joined the military to fight in World War II. And I reflect on, them going over. So these like kids going over, 19, 20 years old, going overseas and then fighting this war against this unknown enemy that, they probably understood kind of, but didn't understand what they were representing. And that's where I stop and I think about myself, about how I'm such a symbol of all of that. And it makes it makes me so deeply proud. And I think about this as like, that the crap that they had to deal with. I think about my dad and his parents, the crap that they had to deal with. I think about that this symbolic nature. These kids, these stupid kids running overseas, fighting this damn war that they didn't understand. And then they find out after the fact of what was really going on. And I think about this a lot and how privileged I am to live this life of like, look at this, right? It's quiet. I'm able to study and look at things that a long time ago, not that long ago, that I would have been, I probably would have been, I wouldn't have been able to, because, I'm too close to, there's a reason why we left, or why they left Poland, and I probably wouldn't have been alive. And I think about that as, just second generation stupid kid growing up, dancing in the living room, about like how lucky I am today just to be living this life. And I know that like there's a lot of things I think about that is, it's challenging and difficult to get back up and study, to do a little bit more work, find the time. But all of that is such a privilege. It's just such a privilege. And I think about like just how of a glorious privilege it is. That's the thing that keeps me going. And that's where it was like, I didn't know. I mean, I've kind of been learning more about my past as I've gotten older. And that's where I thought it was always like this waste of time, because it took away from productivity. It took away from me actually doing work and pushing ahead in that sort of success thing. But I wasn't really like, not terribly happy with, doing this, the sort of pushing ahead. It was always like this. It's still today. It's a struggle to sort of figure this out. But what has made me deeply, deeply at peace more than anything, and it's, happiness is sort of fleeting often, but it's deeply at peace, of reflecting on this, reflecting on my past and learning about, I did not know about any of this stuff. I kind of had like somewhat myths because nobody talked about it. Not that much anyways, of, what they went through. And it has been deeply profound for me to learn about these things, to understand about who I am. Because now I know just how privileged I am, like stupidly privileged. And I hope you learn that too. I hope if you're watching this on the other side, and I think that's why it's such an incredibly important thing to do the Reciprocity Project, is to remind everybody that we're privileged, that it's the least I can do to spend a little bit of money to make our lives easier so we can ensure that it continues on, so that we can continue on doing, research and discovery, so we can give the middle finger to all those people that don't understand it, that want to suppress it, that are scared of it. We just need it. And I think it's like the most important thing for me is to keep building this platform. And I get so much meaning from it as I reflect on it, because I've had to reflect on, why do I do this? Why am I so determined to make it easier for other people to do research, whether particularly from people from other countries, from all around the world, and even people in my own country that I'm living right now that feel isolated and detached. Why it's so important? It's a privilege. That's why.